Seduction, as Machiavelli would describe it, begins not in the body, but in the mind, in the subtle creation of emotional asymmetry. To seduce is not to flatter, but to disrupt. The moment both people feel equal, the game dies. Desire cannot survive balance. It feeds on tension, uncertainty, and the aching imbalance between what is given and what is withheld. Machiavelli understood this better than any lover or poet. He knew that the essence of control lies in dependency, and dependency is born from the strategic manipulation of emotions. The man who can make a woman feel both adored and unsettled holds more influence than the one who simply worships her. The dirty method of seduction is not about cruelty, but calculation. It is about crafting an emotional rhythm that keeps her guessing, a symphony of contradictions that draws her deeper. One day she feels chosen, radiant under your attention. The next, she feels invisible, questioning what she did wrong. That questioning is the seed of obsession. Machiavelli would call this the art of imbalance. By deliberately shifting between warmth and withdrawal, you awaken both pleasure and anxiety in her nervous system. The mind associates you with unpredictability, and unpredictability creates attachment stronger than comfort ever could. In the Renaissance courts, Machiavelli observed that rulers who were both generous and ruthless commanded the deepest loyalty. He applied the same observation to human relationships. The lover who gives endlessly becomes predictable, weak, taken for granted. But the lover who gives strategically, who offers affection like a rare and precious resource, becomes a mystery to be solved. When she cannot predict your affection, she begins to seek it. When she seeks it, she invests in you emotionally. That investment is power, the invisible currency of seduction. Every great seducer understands that emotions must be managed like a marketplace, sometimes flooded with attention, sometimes left dry. Too much kindness breeds complacency. Too much distance breeds suspicion. But the perfect balance between the two breeds addiction. It's a psychological game where reward and punishment alternate just enough to keep her guessing. This is not romance, this is conditioning. Machiavelli, ever the strategist, would compare it to the way a ruler treats his people. Never too harsh to cause revolt, never too soft to invite disrespect. In this dynamic, the seducer is not seeking validation, he is granting it. His silence becomes more valuable than his words, his attention more intoxicating than his touch. He uses presence and absence as tools, appearing just enough to ignite emotion, then disappearing long enough to let her imagination do the rest. She begins to fill the gaps he leaves with her own fantasies, and when fantasy replaces reality, he no longer competes with other men. He becomes a story, a psychological symbol of something larger than himself. The imbalance Machiavelli speaks of is not physical dominance, but emotional leverage. It's the deliberate cultivation of unpredictability, the art of never being fully available, yet never completely gone. A man practicing this art must know how to read emotional cues the way a general reads the battlefield, where she feels secure, withdraw, where she feels doubt. Reassure the game is in constant motion, and mastery lies in maintaining tension without breaking it. The moment she feels she has you, the spell is broken. But as long as she is slightly uncertain, slightly off balance, her emotions remain alive, tethered to you by invisible threads of desire and confusion. This is why Machiavelli believed that affection should be used sparingly, as a weapon disguised as kindness. To seduce through balance is to lose. To seduce through imbalance is to rule. Women are drawn not to perfection, but to power. The kind of power that feels dangerous yet irresistible. The seducer who understands this knows that love is not a contract of equality, but a theater of control. Emotional unpredictability is the stage, attention is the script, and silence is the applause. Machiavelli would observe that people are slaves to those who disturb their peace of mind. And so, the dirtiest method of seduction is not to offer comfort, but to become the storm she can't stop chasing. A storm that gives her light and takes it away, again and again, until the line between love and dependence disappears. It is within that imbalance that true psychological power is born, not through cruelty, but through understanding how fragile the human heart becomes when it cannot predict the next move of the one it desires. To understand the dirtiest method of seduction, one must first understand the architecture of desire, not as an emotion, but as a projection. Machiavelli would say that people do not fall in love with others. They fall in love with what others reflect back to them. Every human carries within themselves an unfulfilled image, an ideal self they long to see mirrored in another's eyes. The master seducer does not try to impress. He becomes the mirror that reflects this secret ideal. He doesn't conquer by showing who he is. He conquers by revealing who she wants to be. Machiavelli knew that power begins in perception, not truth, and perception, when mastered, becomes illusion. To seduce a woman, one must not overwhelm her with personality, but instead dissolve into the image she desires. If she craves adventure, he becomes the storm that cannot be contained. If she craves safety, he becomes the fortress that never falls. He molds his demeanor like a sculptor shapes clay, not lying but adapting. The power lies not in authenticity, but in controlled transformation. This is not deception, it is emotional intelligence weaponized. Every woman carries within her a myth of love, a narrative born of dreams, disappointments, and secret fantasies. The Machiavellian seducer studies this myth not through words but through observation. Her tone when she speaks of past lovers, her eyes when she describes what she fears, her silence when she recalls what broke her. All these reveal the story she unconsciously seeks to repeat or redeem. He listens not to her language but to her longing. Once he understands the archetype she's searching for, the savior, the rebel, the intellectual, the mystery, he steps into that role like an actor who knows his lines by heart. In this way, seduction becomes theater. The stage is psychological, and the performance is intimate. Machiavelli would argue that influence depends on one's ability to manipulate appearances, to craft a persona so aligned with the other's desires that resistance feels unnatural. The woman believes she has found someone who finally understands her. But what she truly finds is a reflection of herself, carefully mirrored back through his behavior, tone, and energy. He becomes the embodiment of her inner fantasy, and in doing so, she invests her emotions, her imagination, and eventually her loyalty. The brilliance of this method lies in subtlety. The seducer does not boast or reveal too much. He lets her imagination complete the picture. He drops fragments of his persona, a story here, a glance there, and allows her to construct the myth around him. In doing so, she becomes the co-creator of her own seduction. The mind, once engaged in fantasy, cannot easily detach from it. This is the invisible thread Machiavelli speaks of. The emotional tether forged not through physicality, but through projection. She begins to chase the version of him that lives in her mind, not the man himself. And as long as that illusion remains alive, he holds the upper hand. Machiavelli would remind us that power does not come from truth, but from belief. The seducer's role, therefore, is to curate belief. He crafts an atmosphere around himself, a mystery, a sense of purpose, a taste of danger, elements that stimulate her imagination. Women, he would say, are not drawn to what is obvious, but to what must be interpreted. The more she has to guess, the more she invests in guessing. The more she interprets, the more she personalizes. And once she personalizes, the seduction no longer feels external. It feels like destiny. This technique, dark and elegant, is not manipulation for cruelty's sake, but for understanding the psychology of attraction. The seducer recognizes that logic cannot inspire longing, only imagination can. He paints with suggestion, not declaration. He knows that a woman's heart, once engaged in creating meaning, cannot easily let go of the story she's written. The Machiavellian seducer, therefore, is both artist and strategist, crafting not love, but illusion, not dominance, but fascination. In this art of emotional projection, the seducer does not simply make her desire him, he makes her feel seen in a way no one else has. And that is the ultimate seduction, not lust, but recognition. When she believes that he understands her soul, she will forgive his absence, justify his distance, and crave his return. She will not see him as a man to be won, but as a mirror she cannot live without. The secret, then, is not in becoming irresistible, it is in becoming irreplaceable. Machiavelli, though remembered as a master of strategy and deception, understood that the most powerful form of influence does not come from strength alone. It comes from the illusion of weakness, deliberately revealed. Seduction at its highest level is not the art of domination but of disarming. True control lies not in appearing invincible, but in knowing when to bleed with purpose. The seducer who hides all emotion becomes cold and unapproachable. The one who exposes too much becomes ordinary and easily read. The secret, Machiavelli would say, lies in controlled vulnerability, the ability to reveal emotion as a weapon, never as a wound. In the courts of Florence, Machiavelli observed how rulers who appeared completely ruthless were feared, but never loved. Yet those who strategically revealed fragments of humanity, a display of regret, a moment of doubt, tear shed in public, commanded both loyalty and affection. People mistake transparency for truth. They see emotion and assume sincerity. The Machiavellian seducer uses this psychological truth to craft connection without surrender. He shows just enough feeling to appear real, never enough to lose control. His vulnerability becomes his disguise, a tool to lower her defenses while keeping his own intact. The feminine psyche, deeply attuned to emotional energy, seeks authenticity more than logic. A woman, Machiavelli would note, falls not for perfection, but for relatability cloaked in strength. She wants to feel the contrast, the man who can hold power in one hand and pain in the other. The controlled vulnerability creates an emotional paradox that draws her in. It makes her feel as though she alone has seen the side of him the world never sees. That illusion of being the only one who can reach his depth is intoxicating. She begins to attach herself not just to his presence, but to the idea that she understands him in a way no one else does. Machiavelli might compare this to diplomacy. A ruler never reveals his weakness to everyone, only to those he seeks to bind in loyalty. When a seducer reveals a fragment of his past, a scar from betrayal, or a quiet moment of pain, he is not confessing, he is crafting intimacy. The confession is selective, rehearsed in tone and timing. It comes at a moment when her guard is low, when she's emotionally invested enough to feel compassion, but not suspicion. This precise calibration makes her soften, protect, and connect. She begins to mistake his intentional vulnerability for genuine dependence. The more she nurtures this perceived connection, the deeper her emotional investment becomes. Controlled vulnerability also triggers a powerful instinct within women, the desire to heal. The Machiavellian seducer knows that when a woman believes she can fix him, she begins to fall for him. It gives her purpose and meaning, two forces stronger than attraction itself. She imagines that her love will save him, that she will be the one to restore his faith, mend his heart, and redeem his darkness. What she doesn't see is that he never truly gives her the tools to complete the task. He remains slightly unreachable, always within touch but never within grasp. This tension sustains her emotional engagement, feeding both her empathy and her longing. The genius of this method lies in its contradiction, strength disguised as softness. The seducer remains emotionally dominant while appearing emotionally exposed. He never pleads, never overexplains, never becomes desperate for understanding. Instead, he allows silence to do the work. He lets his vulnerability echo in the empty spaces of the conversation, where her imagination rushes to fill the gaps. She interprets his pauses as depth, his restraint as mystery, his emotional scars as evidence of authenticity. In truth, he controls the narrative even in his silence. Machiavelli would remind us that perception rules reality. By mastering the art of emotional exposure, the seducer turns perceived weakness into influence. Every revelation he offers becomes a strategic act, a piece of theater designed to evoke emotion and establish connection. The key lies in balance. Reveal enough to invite curiosity, but not enough to end it. Too much honesty kills mystery. Too little kills trust. The Machiavellian seducer walks this line with precision, ensuring that his vulnerability deepens the connection while preserving his power. In this dynamic, the woman feels emotionally privileged, chosen among others to see behind his armor. Her affection transforms into devotion because she believes she holds the key to his hidden soul. Yet in truth, what she holds is only what he allows her to see. His vulnerability becomes the velvet rope that keeps her close but never lets her in completely. Through this illusion, he binds her not by dominance but by emotional significance. Thus, controlled vulnerability becomes the most dangerous form of power, one that seduces not through force, but through the artful simulation of surrender. It is not manipulation in the crude sense, it is mastery of human psychology. The Machiavellian seducer does not seek pity or admiration, he seeks to create emotional gravity, the kind that pulls her deeper the more she believes she's saving him. In Machiavelli's philosophy, the greatest power is not in presence, but in absence. The art of seduction does not end when desire is sparked. It matures when distance is introduced. To dominate the emotional landscape of another, one must learn the psychological alchemy of withdrawal. Every great manipulator of hearts, every ruler of human emotion, knows that disappearance is not retreat. It is a weapon, sharp as any blade. Machiavelli, if he were to speak of love, would call it strategic withdrawal, the method by which a man transforms curiosity into obsession. The human mind, he would say, does not crave what it possesses. It craves what it cannot fully grasp. When the seducer withdraws after establishing emotional intimacy, he triggers a crisis in the psyche of the woman. The warmth once felt becomes memory, and the absence becomes the echo she cannot silence. This is the turning point where desire shifts from choice to compulsion. The Machiavellian understands that attention is abundance, but absence creates scarcity, and scarcity multiplies value. When he steps back, every moment, every glance, every word he once offered becomes amplified in meaning. Her mind replays the smallest gestures, trying to decode their significance. What was once ordinary becomes sacred. In the courts of Florence, Machiavelli observed that power was never held by those constantly seen, but by those whose presence was rare and unpredictable. The mystery of a ruler made him feared. The predictability of one made him disposable. In the same way, the seducer, who is always available, loses gravity, while the one who vanishes strategically becomes mythic in memory. The woman begins to fill the void with imagination, and imagination, Machiavelli knew, is more powerful than reality. She starts to assign meaning to his silence, intention to his absence. Every unanswered message becomes a message in itself. Every delay an emotional test. The mind that once admired now obsesses. But withdrawal, in the Machiavellian sense, is not cold abandonment. It is carefully timed and psychologically designed. The seducer withdraws only after emotional tension has been cultivated, after she feels seen, valued, and emotionally invested. He builds a bridge and then disappears halfway across it, forcing her to cross the rest in longing. This distance, paradoxically, makes her chase not him, but the feeling he once gave her. She does not miss the man. She misses her reflection in his gaze. That is the core of Machiavelli's psychological warfare, to make others believe that chasing you is chasing themselves. Withdrawal also serves a deeper function. It allows the seducer to reclaim power. Emotional attachment is a form of negotiation, and he who cares less always dictates the terms. By stepping away, the Machiavellian repositions himself as the prize. He forces her into a reactive state while he returns to control. This maneuver mirrors political strategy. When a prince withdraws resources or attention, his subjects panic. They scramble to regain favor. The same law applies to human hearts. Her mind becomes his battlefield, her emotions his supply chain. He governs without speaking, influences without appearing, and reigns without effort. Genius of this method lies in how it manipulates time. Every pause becomes pressure. Every absence becomes a mirror reflecting her fears, her fantasies, her insecurities. She begins to wonder if she did something wrong, if she's losing his interest, if she was never as special as she believed. This self-doubt deepens the emotional investment because the human mind seeks resolution more than truth. She needs closure, and he withholds it. Need transforms into pursuit. Machiavelli would smile at the simplicity of it. The one who can make another person seek answers from silence becomes the true master of their soul. Even when the seducer returns, his reappearance is never casual. It is deliberate, measured in tone, minimal in words, rich in implication. He gives just enough to rekindle the flame, never enough to end the hunger. This creates a psychological loop. The more she receives, the more she wants, the more he withholds, the deeper she falls. It is not cruelty, but orchestration. The seducer becomes the conductor of her emotions, guiding her highs and lows like notes in a symphony. Through scarcity, he turns himself from a man into a myth, from a memory into an obsession. Machiavelli would argue that love, like power, must be sustained by fear of loss. The seducer's withdrawal embodies this principle. It keeps his value alive through uncertainty. Predictability kills desire. Mystery resurrects it. A woman will tolerate absence if it feels meaningful, but she will never crave what feels guaranteed. Thus, The Machiavellian seducer crafts a paradoxy. He makes her feel chosen even when he is gone. His silence becomes communication, his distance a form of intimacy. She convinces herself that his withdrawal is a test, that his mystery hides depth, that his restraint conceals passion. This is the final layer of Machiavelli's dark seduction. To command from the shadows, to be more powerful in absence than in presence, to become the thought she cannot escape. Withdrawal, when done with precision, does not end desire. It immortalizes it. Through distance, he transforms attraction into obsession, affection into fixation, curiosity into devotion. In this game, he does not chase, he does not beg, he does not explain. He simply steps back and lets her mind do the chasing. In the end, what Machiavelli teaches us is that seduction, like politics, is never about love. It is about power. The man who understands this stops chasing affection and begins to orchestrate emotion. He learns that attraction is not born from appearance, but from psychological control. Through imbalance, he awakens tension. Through projection, he becomes fantasy. Through vulnerability, he crafts connection. And through withdrawal, he creates obsession. Each move, each silence, each carefully measured gesture forms part of an invisible design, the architecture of influence that governs both hearts and empires. To seduce, in the Machiavellian sense, is not to deceive for pleasure, but to command through perception. It is to know that people are ruled by emotions more than reason, by imagination more than truth. The Machiavellian seducer does not dominate by force. He dominates by allowing others to choose their own enslavement. He understands that what people chase is never the person. It is the feeling that person awakens within them. And by mastering that feeling, he holds the true throne of power. Every act of seduction is therefore an act of strategy. It is not random passion but deliberate design, a study of psychology, timing, and human weakness. Machiavelli's wisdom reminds us that love and war are not opposites, they are reflections of the same game. Both demand patience, precision, the courage to play in the shadows while others stumble in the light. The dirtiest method to seduce, then, is not physical at all. It is psychological mastery, the ability to enter another's mind and rearrange their emotions until they can no longer tell where their desire ends and your influence begins. It is to make her crave your absence, to confuse her peace with your presence, and to turn yourself into both her torment and her cure. That is the Machiavellian art of seduction. Not to be loved, but to be unforgettable.